hello, Keith, and welcome back to Rock and Roll English.
Hi, Martin. It's great to be back here, rocking and rolling with you again.
Great to have you. And you have turned into a YouTube sensation since the last time we spoke. I think the last time we spoke, you had about 10 subscribers, maybe
Yes.
12. And
Yes.
I think it's in the millions now.
It's increased. It's madness. It's increased, I think, 3 million plus now. It's just grown and grown and grown. Obviously, a big demand for IELTS and IELTS speaking. I don't know why people follow me, but there you go. They do.
As I mentioned briefly in our pre-podcast chat, I think you are being very modest there, Keith, because I personally think I've seen a couple of your lives that they are absolutely fantastic from a teaching perspective. So I think you absolutely deserve all of this success.
Wow.
So I'll tell people constantly to go and follow you because I think
so
you are
much.
absolutely brilliant.
Wow.
But
I'm going red.
But you mentioned there, so obviously the main thing you teach is IELTS speaking.
Yeah.
And a big part of that is vocabulary, because I'm sure you will know this better than me, Keith. If you want to get one of the high marks, it says something, I can't actually remember now, about using
Idiomatic language, using less common vocabulary, less common idiomatic expressions. Yeah, to get that kind of band 7 in IELTS speaking. Yeah.
Yes, I used to know all of these bands much better and what was written in them, but I haven't taught an IELTS class for a couple of years now.
Yeah, we forget.
Yeah, exactly. So I have lots of idiomatic language here.
Great.
And so here is how it's going to work. I'm going to say the expression and I will ask you for a definition. And as we did speak about in our pre-podcast chat, it's not always easy to give a definition. So then I have, let's say, I wasn't not correct, but I have a definition from ChatGPT. Okay.
Right. The most reliable source. Yes, it's
course.
A good source.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then we will both share a kind of anecdote or story using this idiomatic term. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So
sounds good.
Okay. So the first one I have on my list is to be strapped for cash. So let's have a definition, Keith.
To be strapped for cash means you don't have a lot of money, cash being money. So I think typically at the end of the month, people are strapped for cash because they've spent all their salary.
Absolutely. Brilliant. Yeah. So Mr. Chat GPT said to have very little money, to be financially tight or in a difficult financial situation. So exactly that. So when was a time that you have been strapped for cash, Keith?
It's a good question. I'll tell you when I first moved to Spain about 5 years ago. We just arrived here, and after a few months, we spent quite a bit of our savings getting established in Spain. And I remember the first summer we were here, my daughter wanted to do like a summer camp where they go surfing because we're by the beach and they do surfing activities. And she did a week. But then after that, she came and said, I want to do a second week. Is that okay? And I was looking at the bank balance and I was really strapped for cash. And it was a real shame. But in the end, we had to say no because it wasn't cheap. And, we were just still settling down in the country. That was what happened to me.
Wow. That actually sounds quite similar to me at the moment. But I moved back to my home country, the UK, and it's so expensive that I'm always strapped for cash.
Right.
But yeah, so what lessons were they again?
So they were during the summer holidays, they have surfing lessons.
Oh,
and
beautiful.
She was new to surfing and she got really excited about it and enjoyed it. But yeah, they do it week by week. They kind of drip feed it. And after a week, we were all great, lovely, and didn't expect her to come back saying, week number 2.
Yeah, well, maybe it was a good job you did stop at week number 2. Otherwise, it may have gone for like 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Indeed. And interesting, you said that you'd moved from Italy back to the UK.
Yeah.
When you've moved back to the UK, what kind of things have you noticed are more expensive?
Literally everything, even breathing air. But obviously the main one is like houses. So paying rent. And the other big one, so transport as well, is really expensive. So just paying for those things leaves me very strapped for cash at the end of the month. But the story I had about this was when I was at university. I think, like most students, I was very strapped for cash, and I specifically remember once I had about £12 in my bank account.
Right.
But some more money was coming in soon. I can't remember. I must have been getting paid or something like that. And so I only had £12. And I remember there was a big football match on, Arsenal against Real Madrid. And I went to the pub with my friends. So it was a weekday. It was a Wednesday, Champions League. And they were doing a pint for £1. And I took £10 out of the cash machine. And it's one of the only times in my life that I have drunk 10 pints of beer. But it was a fantastic night. So despite being strapped for cash, I certainly enjoyed myself.
I'm sure whatever the result, you would have enjoyed yourself.
Yeah.
£1 a pint.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't think they do that anymore. It was obviously, I think, showing my age quite a long time ago.
And who won the game?
Oh, so that was Arsenal. And the game actually, still to this day, was one of the greatest games I've ever seen, because it was the first time an English team beat Real Madrid in Madrid. And I still remember when Arsenal scored that goal. It was absolute chaos in that pub, especially because it was towards the end of the match. So we were probably about 7 pints in at this point. So yeah, it was absolute carnage.
Can you imagine?
Yeah. So another one I have here is hit and miss. What does that mean, Keith?
Hit and miss. If something is hit and miss, I think it's not very reliable. Kind of, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. Exactly. Something like that.
I think that's a very good definition. Mr. Chat said inconsistent or unpredictable, involving a mixture of successes and failures without a clear pattern, which I think is interesting. The without a clear pattern. So you never really know if it's going to be a success or a failure.
Right.
So what is an example you have of this, Keith?
Hit and miss. Yes. I mean, the original example I was, well, let me think. I'm thinking about films. So I'm a bit of a Netflix fan. I love Netflix, and I used to love Netflix. I think it's got worse and worse. But so I pop in sometimes and I pick a film and I watch a film. And to be honest, I think that the films on Netflix are hit and miss. So, definitely. You know, I thought as a film I watched was called Extraction. Do you remember that? It was a kind of an action film, drama, one of the Chris Helmsworth films. And I thought, this will be great. And I watched it, and it was a load of rubbish. It was absolutely terrible. And then another day, I was watching a film, which I actually recommended to my students, called The Swimmers. About a couple of, I think there were Syrian girls who were competing internationally or nationally for swimming competitions. And then they, in the Syrian exodus, if you like, they became refugees, and they went on a boat, and there's trouble on the boat. I won't give anything away, but it was a great film. But yeah, I think things like that, films on Netflix, are hit and miss.
Absolutely. In fact, before I had children, and when I had a kind of life with my wife,
we have no life now.
No, exactly.
Children, that's it.
Certainly no time together. So often on a Saturday night, we would sit down and choose a film on Netflix. But I actually don't watch many films because I'm worried about watching a rubbish film, because I don't like to waste, obviously, 2 hours of my life watching a rubbish film. So very often what would end up happening on a Saturday night is we would spend sort of 40 minutes trying to choose a film.
Right.
Saying, what about this? I don't know. What about this? Does this sound good? Reading the sort of descriptions.
The research and then look at the review.
And then realizing, oh, it's actually quite late now. Should we just go to bed and not watch a film?
That's one way around it. Yes. Yeah.
Because as you said, the films are very hit and miss. So you don't want to be watching some rubbish film. For me, I was thinking about videos on Instagram. Okay, sometimes I think, okay, I've made this video, this is going to be a huge success, and like my mum will like it, and maybe my wife, and does absolutely rubbish. But at the same time, I've uploaded other videos where I kind of think, well, it's a bit rubbish, but I should really post something today, and it explodes.
Right.
And so, yeah, for me, videos on Instagram are very hit and miss.
That's interesting. I agree. And you're talking there as a creator of videos.
Yeah.
I agree they're hit and miss as a viewer of videos, that some are good and some are bad. In your experience, which kind of, I mean, you're on Instagram, what kind of videos do you generally find people like?
I have a new one where I kind of give them a kind of quiz that generally works, where I say a phrase like the price of peas, and it's like, did I say the price or the prize of peas or peace?
Oh, like pronunciation.
Yep. And then people comment. That generally does well. But yeah, I've had other ones where I was sure, I remember thinking this is going to be huge, and then just literally nothing. I went to the aquarium quite recently with my children, and I thought, right, I'm going to make a video. So I was there with my phone filming all of these fish, and I thought, oh, people are going to love this. Absolutely not.
Because your kids are young, right? How old are the kids?
Yes. So 9 months, and the other one must be 2 and 9 months, because there's exactly 2 years between them. So yeah.
That's lovely. It's the old strategy of either use a cat or young kids normally works, but not always. It's hit and miss.
Absolutely. So the next one is to do something up, which generally, in fact, you tell us, Keith, the definition, man.
So, well, the one that pops to my mind is to do something up, is to do a house up, is to renovate a house.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. That's the first one. I can't really think of any other times where that would be used. The only version I can think of is, I remember a friend would always talk about girls and say, when she's done up, she looks great. To say like when she's going out with like makeup and stuff.
She's made up.
But I mean, this is when we were teenagers. I just remember him using that phrase quite a lot, and it wasn't a term that I was particularly familiar with.
You can do up, I guess you can do up your buttons, right? Do up your shirt.
Yeah.
Or if you're flying low, do up your flies. Maybe.
Of course, that I think is a slightly different meaning though but in this sense of like to make something better, like you said, to like renovate the house. So in fact, Mr. Chat says to renovate or refurbish a house, to make improvements or repairs to a building. So have you done up a house, Keith?
I have done up a house. I like that word, refurbish. That's a great word. Refurbish, renovate. I have done up a house. I mean, going back to not when we moved to Spain, but I think it's 2 years ago, we decided, we're going to settle in Spain. So we bought a house in Spain, and it was a place that needed doing up. So basically it was quite fairly old. I mean, some of the stuff was good, but there were certain areas, certain floors we had to change. We knocked down a wall or two and put up some new walls. So we did up the house, and it took bloody ages. I mean, they said, we'll take about a couple of months. Builders took about 6 months or more to do everything up. I think it was more than that in the end, because certain things just went on and on and on. They just didn't get finished. So we have done up a house here, in Spain.
Okay, so my big question here, I think I understood something from your answer, is we often talk on Rock and Roll English about how I am not a real man because I don't know how to use a hammer or a screwdriver or things like this. What about you, Keith? So if you have to do up a house, are you capable of this?
Oh dear, you've hit my Achilles heel. I'm a bit like you. I'm rubbish at DIY.
Right. Okay.
So everything we look at, I say, we'll get the painter in. Oh, we'll get somebody in to do that. My wife's the opposite. She's like, no, we'll have a go. We'll do that. So I can just about change plugs.
Okay, that's more than me. So
and I've learned, actually. It was interesting over the 2 years when things have not quite worked out, or we've had to help out, whatever. So I've learned I can do a bit of painting now. I can change plugs. I can put I've put a shelf up. I mean, how good is that? I actually have put up a shelf.
If we were having a real man competition, you would be destroying me at the moment. I have never put a shelf up.
It's not as hard as you think, and all you need is the motivation. Like, really, you're desperate for somewhere to put books, and you know where you learn, right? On YouTube.
I was about to say that, yeah.
And that's it.
I did once put a picture up, and that was a great day until my wife said it's not straight, and that just kind of destroyed my confidence.
And since then, you've never lifted a hammer.
No. And in fact, so my example of this is actually my father-in-law, who I feel quite sorry for, because we bought a house in Sicily, and basically he spent 3 to 4 years doing that place up.
Wow.
And then we sold it and moved to England.
Was he annoyed?
He wasn't, because he's a great guy. Well, he didn't express it to me if he was. I certainly would have been in his shoes, but he's a nice person. So in fact, he would come to our house, which was a 3-hour drive away, to our house. So we would work, obviously, during the week, come to our house at the weekend, spend all day doing some kind of DIY stuff. I was the person like holding his tools. Do you know, like when you have like a 6-year-old doing that? But it's just, I was like 36 at the time, and he was like, "Can you pass me the hammer?" But it was great to learn Italian vocabulary for these things. So
that is very interesting you say that. I learned a whole bunch of Spanish vocabulary for things like skirting boards, hammer, nail, that I didn't know before. It is interesting. Yeah, it boosts your vocabulary.
Absolutely. So, okay, on to the next one. To run out of steam. What does that mean, Keith?
To run out of steam, I think it means, well, it kind of means that you're tired, that you've been doing something difficult and you run out of steam because you're tired.
Yes, absolutely. And Mr. Chat's definition is to lose energy or enthusiasm, which I think that's quite interesting. To lose enthusiasm, to become tired or exhausted, especially in the context of physical or mental effort. So,
yes. Makes sense.
What about you, Keith? When is a time that you have run out of steam?
I ran out of steam. I'll tell you a time that is very clear for me, or very vivid, is when I was doing a master's degree. I did it quite late in life. In 2013, I think I began. And it was part-time. So I was working at the time. I was working actually out in China, and full-time job, and then part-time doing my master's degree. And I do remember after, I think, the second year, I ran out of steam. I had no energy, because you're there in the evenings when you get home from work, you're kind of sitting down trying to study every evening, a couple of hours. It's interesting you said motivation or energy or enthusiasm. I ran out of physical energy and psychological energy. I was just like, I wanted to give up and just, I can't carry on.
Absolutely, I can imagine. But did you manage to get it done?
I did. The way round it was I deferred for a term. So basically, I said to the university, "Can I take 6 weeks off? Not 6 weeks, 6 months.
Okay.
Can I miss this term and carry on the term after?" Because work was so busy. I was just demotivated. So I thought I just need to take a break. So I took 6 months off. And actually, it worked. There's always a fear you're going to lose contact with it, but it worked. I came back full of energy and enthusiasm, and I think I was excited about it, which helped me finish it. Yeah. And I did. Yeah, I finished it.
Okay, excellent. Well done. Yeah, I actually.
What about you? Have you ever run out of steam?
Very often, and especially in this kind of online game that we're in. Right. So, teaching, obviously. So you do lots of YouTube, and so sometimes I've got lots of energy and enthusiasm. Like, I'm contacting people to collaborate. I'm making videos, making podcasts, but then sometimes I just completely run out of steam, and then I just think I can't be bothered to do anything, because I think this happens more now I've got children, and I work for myself, because when you've got a normal job, you just go there and you you know, you're basically told what to do. You know what you should do. When I wake up and I decide what to do, sometimes it's really difficult, especially maybe to make a video for Instagram or YouTube, to not only motivate yourself, but to put yourself on camera and pretend that you're enjoying life.
Hello.
Yeah, exactly. Because you have to be enthusiastic, obviously, when you do these kind of things.
You don't always feel like it.
Absolutely not. So I often find myself running out of steam.
But what do you do then when you run out of steam? I mean, you could either go back to bed, but what do you normally do?
No, I kind of plow through, I suppose, which is a nice term. Like I do something, because I've always got things to do. So I will always find something I can do, but I would obviously choose the not being on camera version, or having to record a podcast, just maybe edit a podcast, for example, which is quite a boring job to do.
Less energy.
Yeah, exactly. But so that I would normally go for those, or like some admin, like respond to emails kind of thing. Just avoid anyone having to look at my face, which actually brings me to the next one quite nicely, which is to have a face like thunder.
Thunder as in like in the storm, right?
Yeah. What does that mean?
To have a face like thunder. I guess the storm image is quite good when you see those emojis with lightning and they're angry. I think a face like thunder is when somebody's angry. I would say it's when you're angry, upset, maybe.
Absolutely, yeah. So these words exactly are in the definition from Mr. Chat: an angry or displeased facial expression indicating strong negative emotions. So do you have a story anecdote for us, Keith?
Oh my God, yes. And it's a very pertinent one. I say that, maybe you can relate to it. So when we moved to Spain, I keep talking about Spain, but it's where I live. It's been a change moving here. We brought some stuff from China, right? And this is no joke. It sounds like a joke, but we brought this old Ming vase. It was a very old vase. It was an antique. I don't think it was worth a lot, but my wife really liked it, really. And it's one that you put outside, and we put outside on the kind of at the entrance of the house, but just outside. And one day I was coming home, parking the car, and still hadn't quite worked out exactly where to park the car, but it parks right in front of the house. And I hit the vase, and the vase shattered. Yeah, I know. We've had this vase for like donkey's years. Yeah. And my wife came out and said, "What was that noise?" And I just looked at her and went, and she saw the vase, and I kid you not, her face was like thunder, like the worst storm you've ever been in. And she flew off the handle. She went mad. "What have you done?" And I said, "It was an accident. I didn't see it." Said, "How can you not see it? It's there in front of your eyes." And yeah, that was definitely a face like thunder.
Right. Yeah, I can imagine. Wow. And obviously there's nothing you can do. It's not like you can glue it back together. No,
not really. I had to throw it away.
That must have been painful. Really painful.
It was painful for her in particular, and for me, because I was annoyed or upset with myself for having done it, because I thought, well, it was a stupid thing to do, but it was an accident. I mean,
yeah, accidents happen, don't they?
Yes.
So for me, a common thing, which, well, I suppose not that common these days, but at times where I have been lucky enough to go to the gym in the morning these days, because that I used to always do that, start the day in a positive way. I loved it. I'd come back feeling fantastic. But obviously this is much more difficult for me to do with children now, because if I go to the gym, that means I'm leaving my wife with both of them.
Yep.
And a few times, so she said to me, no, go, like, have a good time. And then a couple of times, only once or twice, I've come back and immediately I see her face, and she has a face like thunder. And I think, this has not been a good morning, has it?
Oh, yeah. Because the kids have been playing up.
Yes, exactly. So then I think, actually, probably best if I don't, because it must be quite frustrating when you've got two screaming children and then your partner's just at the gym having a lovely time. I can understand.
Absolutely. It's hard, that, because I guess it's hit and miss, right? That maybe sometimes the kids are behaving really well and other times they're upset. But yeah, I do empathize with your wife. It's very difficult having kids that age and having to wait for I mean, if your husband's coming back from work, maybe,
it's understandable.
but he's come back from the gym relaxed and
exactly.
Yeah.
So that's why I actually very rarely go, because like you said, it's hit and miss. I don't know if it's going to be a good morning or a bad morning.
Right.
You just don't know.
So it's not worth it.
Exactly. It's not worth the risk.
You're a good husband.
Exactly. That's the moral of this story. I'm a good husband.
Yes.
Okay. So another one here. So to grate on someone.
Right. To grate on someone. It's an interesting one. To grate on someone. I think it's when somebody's, initially for me, it's when somebody's voice is, somebody's talking and you just hear their voice and it sounds like, like nails going down a board, and it just sounds horrible and you just can't stand the sound of that person's voice.
Right.
I'm not sure if the meaning goes wider than that, but I think definitely that's for me what to grate on someone is.
Well, so the definition I have here is to annoy, irritate, or bother someone continuously to cause discomfort or frustration. So yeah, I think basically something you do which grates on someone else.
Any kind of behavior, basically.
Yes, exactly. Right. Yeah.
Right.
So do you have an example for us?
Well, I was thinking back to one of my previous bosses when I was, before I worked for myself. This is not a nice thing to say, but I won't reveal any names. But when I used to work in a company, and I won't even name the company, I had a boss who loved the sound of his own voice and would talk incessantly and drive me mad. And I think it was his voice and his ideas used to grate on me, because it was like, first of all, just listen rather than talk. But secondly, he just went on and on and on. It would rabbit on and on about nonsense, and that would grate on me.
It's very interesting that term you associated with a voice. I think because it's so associated with this old boss of yours. Maybe. Yes, this person's voice. It's like that's the only version of this term. Someone's voice grates on you. Well, luckily you don't have that now, Keith, because
I don't. That has now gone. It's one of the great things of working for yourself. You don't have to listen to your bosses.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely there are pros and cons to working for yourself. Yeah.
What kind of things grate on you?
So the example I have was, so at university I was sharing a house with some friends. And obviously there were 5 of us. And one thing which just grates on me in general, but this friend did it every day, was, so eating, I can't stand it when people eat. So you put the fork in your mouth, which is a normal thing, but then you actually like bite the fork.
Oh my God.
It's almost like you're eating the fork.
And you can hear the sound.
Yeah, which is not an enjoyable sound. And he used to do this every day. We would be watching TV, and then I could just hear my friend basically eating a fork. Right. And that noise really grated on me. And I remember once, well, I wouldn't say I exploded, but it just came out of me. And I said, look, can you stop eating your fork? And yeah.
What did he say?
He wasn't particularly happy. He threw something back at me about the way I was cutting some toast. Very pedantic stuff.
Right. Right.
But yeah, that really grates on me. And so I think an interesting thing of the definition here is it says, or bother someone continuously, because I think in both of our examples, it wasn't just they did that one time.
Yeah.
It happens continuously, and it keeps grating on you until basically you can't take it anymore.
It's very, very true. And I think also, I mean, for me, it's often the person doing this, whatever they're doing, they're not aware that it's annoying the other person. It's not like deliberately trying to wind you up or annoy you. It's just they do it without being aware that actually the impact it's having.
Absolutely. So, okay, a couple more that we have here. Yeah, so this one, to be in 2 minds.
Yes. To be in 2 minds is basically, I guess, when you're trying to make a decision and you can't decide whether to do A or to do B. So it's being a bit indecisive, maybe.
Absolutely, yeah. So pretty much exactly what we have from Mr. Chat. So to be undecided or uncertain, to have difficulty making a decision because of conflicting thoughts or feelings. So what about you, Keith? When was a time that you were in two minds?
There are probably loads of times, because I'm not the most decisive person in the world. So there's probably lots of examples. But one, I guess an important one in my life was when I left university and I started looking for work. Actually, that's not strictly true. I left university, I did a gap year, I went traveling for a year, came back, then thought, right, what am I going to do? What's my career? And I was in two minds about it, because I was torn between going into teaching, which was interesting for me. I was actually thinking about teaching French, because I studied French at university, or becoming a translator, because I loved the modules at university where we used to translate novels and poetry. And I thought being a translator, French to English or English to French, could be really interesting. So I was in two minds about whether to be a teacher or a translator. And then, well, I guess you know what the answer is, and everybody does. I chose the path of teaching and became a teacher.
Right, interesting. The translator thing, I think, is interesting as well, because when I lived in Italy, I was often asked to translate documents and things.
You're bilingual then, right? In Italian and English?
Yeah, I mean, I have a good level of Italian. I speak to my wife every day in Italian, but it's certainly not perfect, especially for writing. I can have a conversation, absolutely no problems, but for writing especially, because I find in every language the written version is different to obviously the spoken, but in Italian I find it very different. So I was asked many times to translate things, and the thing that I always tried to tell people was, just because you can speak both languages, that does not mean that you can translate both languages, because I think it's a very particular skill to do that, and you need to be trained how to do that, especially when you have to do this verbally. I actually spoke to someone once who told me, an Italian person, to be an interpreter, and he told me, first of all, they had to interpret Italian from Italian to Italian. So basically just the skill of summarizing what someone has just said and saying it to someone else. Because when I also was asked to work as an interpreter once, I refused, but then they begged me so much I ended up going, and it was one of the worst experiences of my life. It's
extremely difficult to do, as you mentioned it. There's a skill around interpreting in real time, simultaneous translation, and delayed interpreting. But also, you're right. I mean, we did modules at university of translation skills and how you approach certain vocabulary and phrases at sentence level or phrase level, and how much poetic license you can have or not.
Yeah, exactly.
And do you translate word for word, or do you translate the meaning? Because there's so much idiomatic language, right? Like like we said, face like thunder. I mean, how do you translate that?
Yeah, exactly.
And it's hard because you've got to capture the nuance.
Yeah.
So I think it's a really tough job. Yeah,
absolutely. So good choice with the teacher, going down the teacher route, Keith.
Maybe
good
slightly
choice.
easier. And what about you? Have you ever been in two minds?
So every day. So I was certainly in two minds when moving back to the UK, and that uncertainty I don't think has actually left me. Still almost every day there'll be a moment of the day where I think, right, that's it. I'm going to get all of my family and we're going to move back to Italy tomorrow. And then in probably the same day, 5 minutes later, I'll think, no, I'm definitely going to stay here. And so I think the absolute definition of being in two minds is me. So not an easy decision to make.
No, difficult. But you don't regret, well, shall I ask, do you regret it?
Moving back to the UK?
Yeah.
I would say regret is a bit strong, but I just sometimes imagine what my bank balance would look like if I was still in Italy, and instead of being strapped for cash in the UK. It would.
You'd have enough for 10 beers rather than one.
Yeah, exactly. I wouldn't have to go out for a pound a pint tonight. So, okay. So for the last one we have here, Keith. So,
Yes.
loose cannon. What is a loose cannon?
A loose cannon is somebody who says things that are unpredictable and you're never quite sure what they're going to say or maybe how they're going to react, maybe.
Yes, I think the whole unpredictable thing, but I would say maybe also actions as well. In fact, I think we have this in the definition. So someone who is unpredictable and uncontrollable, often causing trouble or chaos due to their impulsive actions. So actions like could be physical or like a verbal, let's say.
Right.
So how about you, Keith? Do you know anyone who is a loose cannon?
I do. I'm gonna hark back to the example of my ex-boss.
Okay.
He's the same guy. He was a bit of a character, but he was a loose cannon. And not only from my point of view, but everybody saw him as a loose cannon. And everybody would get really nervous in our department when we had team meetings. Because people, we would have like before we have the meeting, we kind of meet up, to make sure we're singing from the same hymn sheet, right? Make sure we're all aligned. And he'd say, yes, yes, yes. And guaranteed we'd start the meeting and he'd go off on a tangent. He'd be saying stuff that nobody agreed on. Totally a loose cannon. And everyone's like, oh no, what's he doing? And he was the leader. He was the boss. So I guess he had some privilege to do that. But even the other department bosses were like, crazy. He's a little bit crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that he was a loose. I mean, a loose cannon is not always bad, right? I mean, it is the kind of personality of people who can be creative and innovative. But when you're trying to control a situation, loose cannons are
in the workplace. You don't really want a loose cannon, do you? You want to know what's happening. So for a friend I can think of who is a bit of a loose cannon, I can think of two examples. One friend, loose cannon in a positive way. So especially when we were young, go on a night out with him, you never knew what was going to happen, and that was quite enjoyable. But the example I have is, I'm debating whether I should give the name. Okay, no, a family member. Okay, and he is definitely a loose cannon and says things which are just so inappropriate and just out of nowhere. I think he's uncomfortable with silence. I always go back to one example. We must have been teenagers, and he was talking to my cousin, and in the car before this, another family member, let's say, had mentioned, just typical stupid gossip, said, oh, have you seen our cousin's girlfriend? She's put on a bit of weight. And it was like, okay, brilliant, thanks. And then talking to my cousin, and this family member then says, so I hear your girlfriend's put on a lot of weight. I just remember thinking, what are you doing?
Where is your filter?
Yeah, exactly. Just like the conversation just went a bit dead. So he obviously thought, well, how can I get this conversation up and running again? What can I do? And then exactly like it says here, causing trouble due to their impulsive actions. I think it was a very impulsive thing that just came out of, like, he didn't think about it. It was just like, oh, I need to say something.
Right.
And then
say it.
And then
did you ever manage to kind of handle or control that person as a loose cannon?
I would say no. He actually, I won't go into the example, but quite very recently, actually, had put me in another quite difficult situation with something else that he came out with. Not quite as inappropriate, but still inappropriate. Much less, I suppose, than in the past. But yeah, definitely, I've been in lots of difficult situations because of the fact that he is a loose cannon. But there we go. So I've kept you for way too long here,
Oh,
Keith.
No, it's been great. It's been really interesting. I've loved the examples and conversations, sharing it. It's really interesting.
As have I. So thank you so much for joining us again, Keith. I'm sure most people know you these days, given that you are a YouTube superstar, but tell us where people can find out about you anyway.
So I am on YouTube. The channel is English Speaking Success. If you want to improve your English speaking skills, for IELTS in particular, but for anybody who wants to improve English. I have a website called the Keith Speaking Academy. .com, and you can check me out there. I've got lots of free resources there. There's information about IELTS, but there are some courses there. Some are free, some are paid for. You can go and check them out and see if they're right for you. And that's it. I am now and again on Facebook and Instagram, Keith Speaking Academy. I'm not a big social media fan, but I do kind of move around those platforms a bit.
Fantastic. Okay, we'll put links to all of it in the show notes. So
thank you so much.
Thanks again for your time, Keith, and we'll see you soon.
It's a pleasure. Take care, Martin. All the best.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.